the safest way to send our children and our teachers back to work in education. I know we've been getting a lot of questions about that, so today I'm very excited and very happy to welcome Ms. Christine Partricca, who's with us today. Ms. Partricca is the school board representative from District 3. She's also serving as the vice chair for the school board this year, or at least she was the vice chair for the school board. Like many of us, Ms. Partricca does have her law degree. Ms. Partricca is has served as an adjunct professor as well at FGCU here locally, teaching business law. So she's well versed in the legal community, in the legal world, like many of us. She's going to walk us through a very comprehensive, or as comprehensive as can be at this point, with the changing information that continues to come in and continues to adapt as we get ready to reopen schools. She's going to walk us through a wonderful PowerPoint presentation. I believe we will have time for a question and answer session at the end. If you have questions as the presentation goes along, please feel free to use the private chat function on our Zoom call here and send those questions directly to me in that private chat function. I'll be happy to sift through those questions, get to as many of those questions as I can as time will allow when Ms. Partricca is done with her presentation. But otherwise, I'm very happy to have Ms. Partricca here. I know it's a very, very busy time as she prepares and the school board prepares to get our children back to school. And we appreciate the time she's taken out of her day to come join us today and provide us with a large supply of information on how this is going to go. So without further ado, I introduce Ms. Partricca, and the conference is yours.
Thanks so much, Matt. And thanks too for inviting me here today. Partnerships throughout the community are going to be so important as we open schools, and the ability to reach out to your community today. And I understand you're going to be not live streaming this, but putting it up on your YouTube channel later. Sharing this information with as many people as humanly possible is really, really important. So thank you for having me here today. I'm going to jump right in. The first part of the presentation is really going to be about operations and logistics, with the understanding that as a school board member, I kind of have a 30,000-foot view of what's happening. So some of the detailed questions that might come in, I might have to refer you to staff, and I'll have a link coming up here later that you can go to for detailed answers. But I'm going to give you the 30,000-foot overview, and at the end, we'll sort of geek out a little bit and talk about the legal stuff. So I want to start with our reopening models. We have a plan to reopen schools, and that plan provides our families with 4 options. The first is face-to-face, brick and mortar learning. Students have the option and the opportunity to return to school face-to-face. It won't be entirely traditional because we have additional safety measures in place in our schools, and I'll detail those later. The next option is what we're calling Lee Home Connect. That is a live synchronous instruction model. So you will have students at home learning on their computers live with a teacher instructing them on a computer. And this model is the closest to face-to-face instruction as you can get in a virtual world. Teachers will have the ability to break students into small groups and perhaps work with a small group on certain standards, while other students are working in a group together, and perhaps another group is working quietly on a project or an assignment. So this is brand new to Lee County, and we're really excited that we're able to provide this option for our kids and for our families. The third option is Lee Virtual School. Lee Virtual School is an actual school in Lee County with a principal. This school has been in existence for over a decade. It is a module-based, self-paced instruction model. So with Lee Virtual, we're recommending that the students be very much self-starters. They have to be very motivated on their own to get into the coursework, dig into it. They have to be strong readers because a lot of the materials are presented through reading. They do have synchronous and asynchronous instructional opportunities with the teacher in that class. And then our final option is homeschool, which of course Lee County has had for a very long time as well. And as we look at the data, the parent selection data, we can see that we're pretty even with more students right now choosing a virtual option than a face-to-face option. So you can see 38% face-to-face, 37% Lee Home Connect, 13% Lee Virtual, and 1% homeschool. We do have close to 11% of our students who've not yet made a choice. And principals and staff in schools are hard at work right now, reaching out to those families to make sure that they're aware of the options and that they choose the option that works best for their families. We will not necessarily be able to contact every single one of those families. So the families we're unable to contact will be automatically enrolled in face-to-face. And let me talk to you a little bit too about when students can return to face-to-face if they choose a virtual option. So for Lee Home Connect, we're asking families to commit to a 9-week period or a 1/4 period of time before returning face-to-face if that's what they think is best for their child. Of course, we will work with families whose circumstances change if they have extenuating circumstances and there's a reason why their child needs to return to face-to-face before that 9-week period. Principals will be working with individual families on those kinds of requests. Lee Virtual School is a semester-long commitment, which is half of a school year. And the reason for that is that the curriculum offered through Lee Virtual is different, and the pacing of the materials that are consumed by the students is different from what we will be offering in our face-to-face and our Lee Home Connect classrooms. So we don't want to disadvantage students by having them come back to face-to-face when they've been on a different curriculum and a different pacing schedule. So let's talk for a minute about health and safety protocols. In terms of cleaning, we are stepping up our cleaning efforts significantly. I should have started by telling you this. I'm a parent. I have 4 children, ages 13, 14, 15, and 16. I started in the Lee County School District when my youngest was in kindergarten. So I have a pretty good feel for a lot of the different schools, not just from the perspective of a board member, but also from the perspective of a parent. And I can tell you our schools are clean anyways, but we're stepping up our protocols because of COVID-19. And we have 2 main cleaning things that I want to tell you about. The first is a spray that we will be using. The spray will be used on desks and on high-touch areas in classrooms and throughout the school. That will be the primary cleaning tool, I guess, that we will use. And I want you to know that that spray is food safe. So because it's food safe, it's obviously safe for humans, and it's safe for children as well. We released a video, I want to say yesterday. It may have been on the news. It may have been through Lee County. I don't remember which, but it shows a fogging procedure that we will be using. That fogging procedure is used only in the event that a positive case is identified in a room. So that fogger, when you see our employee spraying the fogger in a hazmat suit, that's because the fogger, first of all, it immediately kills the virus, and it is not safe for children. So you spray it in the room. You have to give the room several days for the spray and the chemicals to dissipate. And there's fans that are used. There's a whole process that maintenance goes through when they're utilizing that fogging. The next thing is face covering and mask requirements. And I will note for you the word requirement. I'll talk to you a little bit more about face coverings in the future, but future later on in the presentation. But I want to talk to you here as a parent for a minute. I am requiring right now, actually beginning on Monday, I'm requiring my children to wear a mask every time they have an electronic device in their hands. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want them to be conditioned and prepared for appropriate mask wearing the day they step foot on campus. And I told you, the ages of my children, they're not kindergartners. You should think that mask wearing would be pretty easy for them. And they do a great job wearing a mask in a store, or when we go out, or when we're in environments where they're required or necessary. But they're not conditioned to wear them for long periods of time. It's been a real struggle in this household since Monday, getting the kids to wear the masks. I catch them not wearing them when they're supposed to be wearing them. My oldest complained that the mask didn't fit and it wouldn't stay on her face. And so she had to constantly fiddle with it until it worked correctly. I will tell you that today was better than yesterday, but we're not where we need to be for my kids to go back to school on August 31st. So I just throw that out to you. As you know, that's what we're doing. I learned about that actually as a suggestion from a Lee Health town hall that they did. So if you all could help your children likewise be ready to step foot on campus day one and have them conditioned and used to wearing masks for long periods of time, that would certainly be helpful to the district and to the teachers in the classrooms. The next is hand washing and sanitation. There will be frequent hand washing opportunities and breaks throughout the day. Any hand sanitizer with 60% alcohol in it is acceptable. We are encouraging parents to send their children in with hand sanitizer. And the reason for that is it cuts down on congregation points in the classroom and in the schools. So if a child simply has to reach down into their backpack to get their own hand sanitizer, that cuts down on a line at the hand sanitizer that's available to the entire classroom, if that makes sense. So if you have the means to provide your children with your own hand sanitizer, that would be great. And then sanitation, what we mean by that is teaching kids to cough and sneeze into their elbow or into a tissue, and making sure that they immediately dispose of that facial tissue, and then sanitizing their hands immediately after a cough or a sneeze or something like that. Handling suspected cases or presumptive cases, I'll get into detail on that on the next slide, but suffice it to say that students who are suspected to have COVID or exhibiting COVID-like symptoms will be placed in an isolation room. And that isolation room will be constantly manned by a member of staff that's specifically trained to be in that room. The isolation room will be different from the typical clinic that you have at a school. You know, your child has pink eye or your child has something else that's going on that requires a visit to the nurse's office. That will be separate from the room that we'll be using to isolate students who are exhibiting COVID-like symptoms. Monitoring for symptoms, this is where we're asking for parents' help and for the community's help. If you could please take your child's temperature before you send your child to the bus or to school in the morning, that could very well pick up on a case of COVID and prevent that child from going into school and potentially sharing it with others. So if parents are closely monitoring their children at home for not just a fever, but other COVID-like symptoms, and committing to not sending their children to school, if they have those kinds of symptoms, it would be super helpful for us to be able to keep schools open and keep education running. You know, as a parent, I'm of the opinion that you should go to school unless you're vomiting, bleeding, or dying. And I'm going to have to adjust my approach to that, because I have to be very, very sensitive to the impact that if one of my children is exhibiting COVID-like symptoms, the potential impact of that on not just their classes, but on the entire school community. So I'm having to adjust my parenting along with these protocols that we have in place. And finally, personal protective equipment. We will be providing masks. Masks will be available for all students, all staff. Any staff member that wants a face shield can have one provided for them by the district. We do have some special needs classrooms where there's significant hands-on interaction between teachers and students, and they will have gowns, medical gowns that they will be wearing, and the district will be providing those. We are, again, asking that if parents have the ability to please send their children to school with their own masks, ones that they're used to wearing before stepping foot on campus on day one. But in the event you're not able to do that, we will certainly be providing them for students. And this is kind of a brief shot of what it's going to look like for students if they go to school with COVID-like symptoms. The first is you're at home with your child, it's Monday morning, it's the first day of school, you're going to take his or her temperature, and you're going to look for COVID-like symptoms. There's no issues. You can proceed to school, send them to school. Another caveat I will tell you, my youngest has significant allergies. He's always coughing, he's always sneezing. So during his annual well visit just this past week, we asked for a letter from the doctor explaining to the school that he has allergies and that coughing and sneezing is a regular part of just who he is. And we will have that letter on file with the nurse's office at the school that he attends. So the next step on this chart is if a child is exposed but has no symptoms. So let's say your family has been contacted by the Department of Health and they tell you that you were exposed to someone who has tested positive for COVID. That exposure could have taken place in a classroom, or that exposure could have taken place someplace outside the classroom. It will be up to the local Department of Health to contact you and tell you that. So if your child has been exposed but has absolutely no symptoms, we're requiring a 14-day quarantine at home. So 14 days before the child can return to school. The next step on this chart is if your child is diagnosed, let's say you're contacted by the DOH that you've been exposed and you decide to go ahead and have the whole family tested, even though one or two members of the family are exhibiting no symptoms, we would ask that you keep your child home for 10 days from the date of the positive test. And then the last step here on the chart is if you have a fever and you have COVID, or if you're exhibiting COVID-like symptoms, we would ask that you stay home for 10 days from the date of the first symptom, that you have no fever for 3 days, and the key here is without fever-reducing medicine. You know, my kids get a fever, I give them Advil, I give them Tylenol to make them feel better, but you know that reduces the fever as well. So it's important that kids be fever-free for 3 days without fever-reducing medication. And then, in addition, we'd like them to be 3 days symptom-free or 3 days of the symptoms getting better before they can return to school. Now, the caveat on this one is, let's say my daughter goes to school and she starts to show COVID-like symptoms, and I take her to the doctor and it turns out that she has strep throat. She doesn't have COVID-19. The doctor can write her a note saying when it's appropriate for her to return to school, and then she doesn't have to follow that fourth column there. As long as we can prove medically that whatever it is she's suffering from is not COVID-19, then she would be allowed to return to the classroom before that 10-day period is over. And there's a lot more detail. There's a lot of different scenarios that we run through in what we call our safe reopening plan, which is thankfully right here on the next slide. The safe reopening plan is on a website, which is on the next slide. What I'd like you to know about this plan is that it is incredibly detailed, and it is the result of incredibly hard work by staff and by community partners. Our overall response to COVID-19, I as a member of the school board here in Lee County, I've been very, very proud of our staff and the way they have responded. From the beginning, we were able to offer 88% of our employees the opportunity to work from home. So you remember during the shutdown, it was really important for people to stay home as much as possible. We were able to offer those opportunities to 88% of our employees. We have had more than 13,000 students enrolled in summer school. And summer school here in Lee County was virtual, but we have been able to continue to educate children virtually, 13,000 of them throughout the summer. We've had several home visits. 98% of our students were engaged during the fourth quarter of the school year. 98%, which is really, really a phenomenal number. We have more than 1.5 million meals served, but that graphic at the top there, 16,000 Chromebooks and 5,000 hotspots have been distributed. 1% of school districts across the country have been able to bridge the digital divide. The Lee County School District is amongst that 1%. I'm incredibly proud of our ability to get devices to families and to get hotspots to students and faculty or staff that didn't have access to the internet without that hotspot. That's really a point of pride for me. And then finally, in terms of the stakeholder input, there's a long list of people, organizations, and departments of the district that have collaborated to put this plan together. But the two most important ones are at the top there: the Florida Department of Health, the Lee County, Florida Department of Health, and Lee Health. I was telling Matt earlier, the relationship that we have developed between the Department of Health and Lee Health is probably stronger than any other relationship we've had with any other organization ever. It is a constant daily conversation that is taking place, and their feedback, their recommendations, their expertise allows us to make this plan better every day. Every single day, what we're asking for from our community is to develop a sort of a comfort level with uncertainty, because as we learn new things, we will have to change our plans. And we'll get to a slide about that in just a second. If you all can right now, take a minute to take a screenshot of this slide. This is the website for our reopening plan that has all of the details. Like I said, I'm giving you sort of the 30,000-foot view today, but all of the details of the plan are in there. And the other thing I do is I would invite you, if there's a detail that you're looking for that's not in that plan, please email me or email someone at the school district, because you may be thinking of something that we have not yet thought of. And that's where the community participation in this process is so important, making sure that we've crossed as many foreseeable I's and crossed as many T's and dotted as many I's as humanly possible. Now, of course, unexpected contingencies will come up, but your participation will help us. So I mentioned earlier that we have served close to 1.75 million meals since March 23rd. That's a massive, massive undertaking. Y'all may know, you may not know, that we are a community eligibility program here in Lee County, which means that we have such a high percentage of our students who qualify for free or reduced lunch that almost every student in almost every school is eligible for a free breakfast and lunch at their school. And we were able to continue providing those meals to our students even while schools were shut down. And organizational agility. Agility is so important. Change management is so important. We have had to amend our safety protocols several different times. So you may recall when we first rolled out our plan, masks were not required, they were expected. And then a group of pediatricians got together and sat with the superintendent and sat with staff and presented us with medical evidence and a strong recommendation that we require masks. And so a policy will be coming before the board for us to decide on exactly what the mask protocols will look like. And I'm one of 7 board members, so I can only speak to how I will vote on that policy. But the way it stands right now is we're approaching this from a health perspective. This is not a student code of conduct issue. If a child comes to a school without a mask, we will provide a mask for the child. If the child refuses to wear the mask, we will ask parents to come and bring the child home, pick the child up and bring the child home. If the child continues to refuse to wear the mask in subsequent days, that child will automatically be enrolled in one of our virtual options. So we're not punishing the child, but for the health and safety of the other students and staff in the building, it's necessary for children to wear masks. Now, of course, not every person can wear a mask. So if a child or a staff member has a documented reason for not being able to wear a mask, we will certainly accommodate that in our brick and mortar schools. Our communication plan has been very robust and has also had to change quite a bit because of changing protocols like the mask mandate. The other protocol that changed recently was we are not requiring temperature checks at the schools. Again, we're asking parents to do that before they send their child to school. We're not doing that at the schools. because, again, based on the scientific health and medical advice that we're getting, that actually causes students to congregate together in large groups before they walk into the building. And so it's actually more dangerous from a COVID perspective for us to take those temperatures than it is for parents to do it at home. We have been providing COVID-19 situational updates to our staff from the very beginning. In the beginning, as you can imagine, they were daily. Now we receive them about weekly, but every once in a while something changes and we have to provide them more frequently. Our reopening model, we had to be flexible and agile for our reopening model. I will get into the July 6th executive order in just a minute, but we had originally looked at a hybrid model for reopening schools, and the executive order required the opening of schools 5 days a week. So we had to pivot and figure out a way to make that possible for our children, and we have done that. Finally, the start date for school is another area where we've shown some agility. We were originally supposed to start school on August 10th. We are now starting school on August 31st. And I got some pushback from the community on that. I understand that that's a huge, huge inconvenience, especially to parents who have childcare issues. But the key for us here is making sure that we're doing this well. We don't want to rush. We want to make sure that our parents are fully aware of what's going on, what their options are, what school will look like, what the expectations will be of their children. We also want our teachers and our staff to be well trained and able to manage these new systems that we're going to have in place when we open our buildings. So, we've seen the numbers of COVID drop significantly here in Lee County since we pushed that start date off. And in addition, this extra time was really needed in order for us to sort of tackle a problem that none of us have had to tackle before. We're providing significant supports to our teachers. Our human resources is just the situation they're in. Talk about unprecedented circumstances. They are having to deal with requests from teachers to go virtual. So I told you about the percentage of parents that have chosen face-to-face. As of this morning, I spoke with Chief of Staff, 68% of 5,000 students who have responded to the survey have chosen face-to-face. And the way they're still in the middle of bargaining this with the Teachers Association of Lee County. You see at the bottom of that slide there, TELC. They're still in the middle of bargaining this, but the first teachers who will be given a request or granted a request for a virtual teaching environment will be those who have an ADD accommodation. ADA, an ADA accommodation. So we're asking our teachers to get medical documentation, providing for the need for an ADA accommodation. And those teachers are first being assigned to Lee Virtual School. And again, my conversation with the superintendent's office this morning, I want to say we've had between 60 and 70 of those requests come in. And again, those teachers are being assigned. Now, one of the issues here is assigning teachers to physical classrooms and to Lee Home Connect based on certifications. Different teachers have different certifications. One teacher who might be certified to teach elementary, another middle, one might be math certified, one might be science certified. So making sure we have the appropriate coverage in face-to-face and Lee Home Connect, it's really like the most complicated puzzle you can imagine in your mind. That is what our human resources staff is doing right now. And I am very confident that they're up to the task. Typically we have a nice event at Dunbar High School in their auditorium for new teachers. This year we had a drive-through event where we provided our new teachers with a fun, upbeat sort of day where we had a DJ there, and you can see the balloons, and we handed out new teacher material to those teachers as they drove through the line. Professional development is huge. I mentioned that already. We're going to be training our teachers for not just the new environment, but we also have to train our teachers on Lee Home Connect. This is a brand new instructional delivery model, and every teacher needs to be well-versed in how to manage that classroom environment. We've had some staff Q&A, And I mentioned earlier that the TALC and SPALC bargaining, SPALC stands for the Support Personnel Association of Lee County. Those are our unions, those are our bargaining units, and we bargain with them every year. We have completed the COVID-19 working conditions portion of bargaining, and I suspect that entire process will be done relatively soon. Finally, before we get to the fun legal stuff, fall sports. Will we have high school sports in the fall? Good question. Summer workouts for fall sports are underway. So what does that look like? What does that mean? That means basically preseason conditioning. Our kids are running, our kids are weightlifting, our kids are doing it in small groups. They have to do it in cohorts so that if one child is diagnosed or exposed, that cohort has to stay home for a couple weeks, but it doesn't impact the entire team or the entire program. The Florida High School Athletic Association Board of Directors will be meeting tomorrow in Gainesville to determine calendar and protocol for return to sport. And I am on that board. So actually very shortly after this meeting ends, I'll be jumping in my car to head up to Gainesville. And then finally, middle school sports have been indefinitely postponed. Next steps, I think I've gone through most of this with you, but what I'd like you to take a look at is the start date on the far right-hand side. It says right there that it is subject to change. And I've mentioned several times throughout this presentation, really everything we're doing is subject to change if we get new advice, but to put your minds at ease, we have received zero indication from anyone on staff or any of our medical or healthcare experts that there will be any need to delay our August 31st start date. I've done my back to school shopping for my kids. I fully intend to send them to school on August 31st. Now we get to move on to the legal issues. So sovereign immunity, I'm sure y'all are aware of Florida statute section 768.28 that provides sovereign immunity. Government employees cannot be held personally liable, but damages in cases can be awarded up to $200,000 on a per person basis or up to $300,000 on a per incident basis. You know, I remember being at a presentation where legislators were talking about potential liability issues for businesses and other organizations that open during COVID. And the advice there was to make sure that we were very closely following local health and medical advice and guidelines, and to make sure we were documenting everything that we were doing. And I can tell you with significant certainty that the Lee County School District is doing both of those things in a very detailed manner. And you know, just from a legal perspective, you all can imagine the difficulties of proof when it comes to trying to prove that a child or a staff member contacted COVID in one of our buildings. And also the expense associated with proving that in a court of law. It would require significant scientific and medical expert testimony, and that can be very, very expensive. But in terms of the safety measures that the school district has put in place, and in terms of the documentation of those safety measures, we've taken every step that is available to us with regard to liability. Now, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of Executive Order 6 that was issued by the Department of Education Commissioner Richard Corcoran. That requires the opening of all schools, brick and mortar, 5 days per week to all students. And there's been some pushback. You've seen some pushback from some people saying that the commissioner and the governor are forcing us to reopen schools. That's not what this order did. This order didn't really force us to do anything. The order made it clear what we have to do when we open schools, and it provided us with significant flexibility, which we didn't have before that order was issued. So we have to provide the full menu of services, so to speak, to all of our students. So we have to make sure that our low-income students, our Title I students, are receiving the services that they need through that Title I grant, which can include things like different communication plans and family outreach. It could include additional instructional hours Those types of services have to continue to be available. The next you see is ESE, that's exceptional student education. What many of you would think of as special needs students. Many of those students have an IEP or an individual education plan, and those are very detailed plans and very specific ways that we have to educate children in order for them to be successful in the classroom, and we have to follow those plans. Beginning August 31st, when schools open, whether that child has chosen a virtual option or a face-to-face option, those ESE students will be getting their accommodations according to the IEP that's in place. The next is ELL and ELL committees. ELL stands for English Language Learners. So we have certain requirements with regard to students who may not be able to master standards because they're not proficient in the English language. And typically what we do is we bring an ELL committee together to determine what needs to be in place to support that child, to make sure that child is successful, and that those language barriers, we overcome those language barriers. And then we have other statutory requirements with regard to the children of migrant workers, homeless students, students in foster care, other vulnerable students. And the final thing there is closing achievement gaps. I'm sure you all can imagine, you know, you've heard of the summer slide before, right? So kids get out of school in May or June and they don't go back to school until August or September, and they play all summer. You know, they're not reading, they're not working. And so there's some loss of educational materials during that period of time. Well, now we've got to go all the way back to March. As good as our response to the shutdown was, we know that students suffered in terms of being able to master new standards during that fourth quarter. So we're really going to have to take a close look at where students are when they walk into school on the first day, and make sure that we're putting everything in place necessary to close those achievement gaps for our kids. The executive order also makes it clear that the state will be requiring full testing. So all of that testing that you all are aware of that occurs at the end of the school year, whether it be the FSA or an EOC end of course exam for things like algebra, biology, or civics, all of those tests as of right now will be required at the end of the year. But this is a beautiful part of the executive order is where they provided us with flexibility. They provided us with flexibility on the start date so that each district could determine when they were ready to go back to school and do it successfully. They provided us with flexibility on seat time requirements. Now that's really, really important because we have what's called an FTE count, a full-time equivalent count that occurs at several times throughout the school year. And we receive funding from the state based on the number of children that are sitting in seats physically in schools during those FTE counts, which are calendared and scheduled throughout the year. This executive order gave us the ability to receive funding for those students who are in Lee Home Connect. So even though those students are not physically present in the building, we will still get funding to provide those children with education. And that was really, really important for us from a funding perspective, with, you know, close to 95,000 students in the district, and many, you know, close to 40% of them choosing Lee Home Connect. That would have been a huge hit to us on funding had we not been given that flexibility. And I can't see the final thing there because my screen, it's not showing me what the last thing said on the screen. Let's see if I can go back. The other thing that the executive order required is that if we want to take advantage of this flexibility, we have to present a reopening plan to the Department of Education for their approval. And that plan could include an innovative learning environment, and our Lee Home Connect is that innovative learning environment. And while the plan has not yet been approved by the DOE, we don't anticipate any problems. You know, we worked closely with the DOE to make sure that what we were presenting would be acceptable to them. So that's the executive order. Following the executive order, we had the Florida Education Association, the state teachers union, file a lawsuit, and it was the FEA with some individual parents and some individual teachers that sued Governor DeSantis, Commissioner Corcoran, the Department of Education, and others. And basically what they're claiming is that the executive order violates the Constitution with specific regard to a safe and secure learning environment or safe and secure free public schools. They're claiming that there is no way to make schools safe during a global pandemic. And you know, I'm not going to repeat everything I said earlier in this presentation about the safety measures that we have in place, but I believe that our school environments will be as safe as humanly possible, given the fact that we are actually in the middle of a pandemic. The other issue in the lawsuit is that it claims that students and staff are being forced to return to brick and mortar. And as I mentioned earlier, we have given choices, not just to our families, but our teachers have indicated what their choice is as well. And so force and choice don't necessarily go together. On August 4th, the FEA filed a motion for injunctive relief, asking that school districts not open schools brick and mortar until the underlying issues in the case were resolved. And at the same time, the state filed a motion for change of venue, which was granted. The case is now in Leon County. And the state has also filed a motion to dismiss. The hearing on that motion will actually be tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. So we should have a lot more information on that lawsuit upcoming soon. And then the final legal issue I want to talk to you about is Hillsborough County. I'm not sure whether y'all have heard that Hillsborough County sort of went against the executive order. On July 24th, their school board approved an innovative learning plan that was submitted to the Department of Education, and it was approved by the Department of Education. And then on August 6th, the school board in Hillsborough voted to delay that plan and go full virtual for the first 4 weeks of school. The very next day, Commissioner Corcoran sent a letter to Hillsborough basically telling them that they were operating not only outside the executive order, but outside the confines of the law. And that any closures in Hillsborough County, any decisions regarding a closure in Lee County school, in Hillsborough schools had to be made on a school by school basis. Now, Hillsborough County is more than twice the size of Lee County. We have 120 schools. So you can imagine the level of analysis that would have to go into determining whether each school can or cannot open in Hillsborough. The commissioner gave Hillsborough 3 options. The first is follow the plan you submitted. The second is submit a new plan. Or the third is open schools like you would any other year. And otherwise, there's potential for significant loss of revenue in Hillsborough. And you can see from that final bullet point there, they're looking at a potential $23 million per month decrease in revenue from the state. And there's also some potential bond or debt issues there. I don't know whether Hillsborough has bonds. We don't have bonds here in Lee County. We have what we call certificates of participation. But typically those arrangements, those agreements, whether it be bond agreements or COPS agreements, are put in jeopardy if a state order is not being followed. And again, you know, it's been pretty clearly communicated to Hillsborough that they're not following the state order. And so there's some concern there for bonding and debt issues as well. So that's my presentation. Did I go too long? I did. I went 45. I'm sorry. I wanted to
No,
go.
you did.
I wanted to go faster.
You did great. Thank you.
Right.
We do have a number of questions that I wanted to get through a few of these. A few quick ones right off the bat. Can you tell us if this plan plays into or affects charter schools?
Excellent question. Charter schools are able to submit their own reopening plan to us, and then we submit it to the state for them. So charter schools have the same exact flexibility under that executive order that the school district has.
Great.
And we have received a plan from every one of our charter schools that we have passed on to the state.
I think you did a great job walking us through the educational portion and the in-school portion. What kind of effect will the plan have, or any COVID restrictions have, on maybe after-school programs? You talked about sports a little bit. but any other after-school programs, especially for working parents who may not be able to pick up till later in the afternoon?
It is the intention that we have that before school and after school care available in our elementary schools. That is certainly our intention. And again, we're going to have those safety measures in place, and kids and parents will be made aware of those. But we are very cognizant of the fact that our parents need that care in place. And so we will continue with that.
So it pretty much goes without saying that if those events are triggered, which would cause a quarantine or to be kept out of school, the same applies to either before school or after school programs as well.
Yes, sir.
You talked a little bit early on about when symptoms are identified and quarantining. Want to get a little clarification on if a particular student in a classroom is identified as showing symptoms and is required to quarantine. How does that affect students who may be sitting around or in the same classroom for that child that was flagged for symptoms?
That is an excellent question. I am anxiously awaiting the answer to that question from the district. We have a task force that has been hard at work for weeks now to put together metrics that will let me, you as parents, and the entire community know exactly when we would be required to close a classroom, close a school, and as much as I pray this doesn't happen, potentially close the district. So those metrics, I mentioned earlier, we'd rather be deliberative than be fast. And this is one of those circumstances. I know the community is really thirsting for this information, but we want to do it right. And so until we're certain that we have it right, we're not releasing that. But I expect to have that information at some point this week, if not very early next week.
Great. Obviously, we would hope that families would be being active in reporting if their children are showing symptoms and actively hold their children back or quarantining voluntarily. If that doesn't happen and families fail to report, are teachers being trained to identify symptoms? Are school staff being trained to identify symptoms? How's that process working if families aren't active in holding their children back?
Absolutely. That is part of the teacher training. And our teachers, by the way, go back to school on Tuesday. All of our professional duty days have been pushed to the beginning of the year to provide extra time and extra hours for training exactly like that. We wouldn't normally have to train our teachers to be able to identify those symptoms, but that is part of what we will be training teachers on in advance. Not just teachers, but staff as well. A lot of different employees in a building interact with students, whether it be the people in the lunchroom or our bus drivers. They all need to be trained to identify those symptoms.
Okay. You talked about the selection, whether you choose face-to-face. I think you said you had to make was it a 9-week commitment or the quarter commitment?
Yes.
And the other options you have to commit. What's the plan if a child is quarantined for 14 days for keeping them up to date on their schoolwork? Can they then switch to the virtual while they're in quarantine?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that we're still working through with our bargaining units. And it probably changes based on the older your child is. So, for example, I was talking with the high school principal this morning, and there are some sections of classes that are offered only once, meaning like for instance, there might be only one IB biomedical class offered at a school. So that teacher is going to have to teach both virtual and in the physical classroom. So that teacher is going to have to manage both environments at once. So that will be an easy transition for a child that has to quarantine. They simply jump onto Home Connect. We're continuing to work through the details of that for teachers that have multiple sections, and what's the manageability of that for a teacher who has just one child who's quarantined, and how we can provide robust instruction. But those are details that are still being worked out through the bargaining process.
Okay. This may be a little difficult to outline, but for everyone's reassurance listening here and to the recording, you said you guys have been great working hand in hand with Lee Health in developing this plan and strengthening the relationship there. can you talk a little bit about the involvement from the Department of Health in coming up with these plans, or the Department of Health's advisement in these plans?
Absolutely. You know, I look at this in sort of two different ways. Um, Lee Health, not just Lee Health, but the other doctors that are advising us, they have taken the Hippocratic Oath. So first, do no harm. And so my ability and my confidence in relying on them is very, very strong because they have taken that oath. And the professionals at the Department of Health aren't necessarily MDs. They're not necessarily doctors, but they're well versed in the safety measures and the protocols, and they're also well versed in contact tracing. Now, the Department of Health came in front of the school board for a workshop. I can't remember when, it may have been about a month ago, and we were able to ask them questions. And one of the questions I asked was, how do we handle testing for children? You know, with tests that take 2 weeks, 10 weeks, 10 days to 14 days for those results to come back. How do you contact trace in a school if you don't know a child is positive? Well, the DOH is offering free testing with a 48-hour turnaround on results to people under the age of 18. Now, I mentioned the high level of poverty here in Lee County. Not every family can get to the Michigan Avenue location. So they are also working on providing mobile testing for our students. So that gave me a lot of confidence. And in addition to that, at the time, don't quote me on this number, but I believe at the time they were in front of us, they had 178 employees conducting contact tracing. They were doubling the number of employees they have and devoting a specific number of those employees just to contact tracing for the school district of Lee County. So again, those two factors give me a lot of confidence. You see a lot of information. I'm not going to say it's misinformation, but you see a lot of debate out there about the reliability of advice coming from the DOH. Having sat in that meeting with them and been able to have that conversation and hearing the confidence with which they answered those questions, I'm comfortable with the safety protocols we have in place and with how testing will occur.
Great. You spoke a little bit about being proactive and encouraging parents to be proactive if your child has allergies, or just as their normal physiological activities, they have often a dry cough or sneeze or proclivity to sneezing. Hoping it never happens, but if there is a disagreement between parents and the school about whether a child is showing symptoms, if a teacher says, I think a child is showing symptoms, and a parent says, no, that's their normal behavior, what's the best way for parents to really get ahead of that situation or to confront that situation about their child's normal activities?
The best, whether it be a COVID disagreement or any other disagreement that would occur in a classroom, the best is to approach the teacher first. If you don't get where you need to be with the teacher, go to the principal. If you don't get where you need to go with the principal, then you would contact your school board representative or contact somebody at the district. But with specific regard to COVID, you know, that's a question I haven't considered. And so I'm going to take some notes and I'm going to ask, I'll send that question to the superintendent, Matt, and when I get an answer, I'll send it to you so you can give it to your membership.
Great. Thank you so much. One of the last questions we had, some parents have, as I'm sure you've heard it, expressed some hesitation or concern, especially their younger children, maybe grade school age, not really being comfortable or being frightened by masks or seeing their teachers wearing masks. In your experience and what you've been studying, is there a way, like you said, of conditioning against the fear of wearing a mask? I know they don't like wearing them, but sometimes seeing a new teacher that they don't know wearing a mask causes a lot of hesitation in younger children.
For sure. And we, you know, for our face-to-face students, elementary schools, we're really, really focused on that, specifically with our kindergartners and our littles, you know, our K1 and 2s. And we will have back to school nights, limited back to school nights for parents to bring their children onto campus to meet their kindergarten teacher, so that some of that fear can be overcome. In addition to that, I'm looking for videos and resources, and I've asked the the district to provide resources on their district website and on their district Facebook page for parents to do exactly what you just talked about. Because conditioning a child to get used to wearing a mask at age 6 is a heck of a lot different from age 16. And so one of the things I've seen is putting a mask on the child's favorite stuffed animal and putting a mask on the child and having them sort of play together so that it seems a little bit less scary. And the district is working through a way to communicate that to families as we speak.
To your knowledge, do we still currently have, or does the district or the state currently have any travel advisory restrictions? So if you travel out of town and then come back to school, are there any mandatory restrictions there?
Nope, we don't have any restrictions on that right now. I will tell you that I have read the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee suggestions for the FHSAA and for sport, and there could be some limitations placed on out of county travel for athletics. But again, all of that is dependent upon whatever the board decides tomorrow.
Okay. You were great enough to include the link in your PowerPoint presentation. The link you provided, is that the best source information for making your election and the process for connecting virtually and what parents need to know for getting set up to do the virtual learning?
Yes, there are links in there to the various models that we have available. The period of time for parents to make that election has passed, so they will not be able to go in there and fill out a survey. If a parent is listening, or if you're aware of a parent that has not yet made an election, strongly request that they reach out to the principal at their child's school. If it's a student who's not yet enrolled in the school district of Lee County, reach out to our student enrollment department down at the district so that we can get those kids assigned and up and ready to run. Now, most of us, I've got 4 kids in 3 different schools, and I've received a lot of emails and a lot of text messages and a lot of phone calls from 3 different schools telling me about when to go to the school to pick up the Chromebook, when our virtual open house is going to be, because at the high school level, the open house is being held virtually. So be on the lookout for those notifications that you're getting from schools, and be sure that if there's something you don't understand, make sure that you reach out. It's better for our principals in our schools to have these questions up front than to try to have to respond to it after schools are opened.
Great. And the last question, just to leave everyone who's watching with this, when you do get the updates on that information, the guidance on the criteria for, God forbid, when we need to shut down an entire school or completely change plan, is that information going to be posted to that link?
Yes, I can't imagine that it wouldn't be in that reopening plan, but if, Matt, for some reason it's not added to that page, I'll shoot you an email with the link so you can share it with your membership.
Great. Well, Chris, we really appreciate you coming on again today. I know you're very busy with meetings and meeting with health officials to get this done, and your colleagues on the school board. We want to thank you for your diligence in putting this plan together and making sure our kids and our parents and our teachers are all safe when they go back to school on the 31st. And we look forward to any updated information as it comes along and getting ready for the 31st. So thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us today.
Matt, I really appreciate the opportunity. I really do. The more people who can know what we're doing and participate in the process, the more successful we'll be. So really, thank you for this.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining. If you have additional questions, be sure to check out that link for information as it becomes available. With any other questions, you can check out the Lee County Bar website, the school district website, and for more information, we'll keep posting links as information comes available. Thanks and have a great afternoon.
Bye, guys. Thank you.